Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. All right. I don't know how many of you are going to come back for this stream, but that's okay. It's evergreen. This isn't dependent on interaction with the chat room. Although it was nice to see a bunch of you folks showing up for the last one we did. What are these things that we're doing? First of all, hi, my name is Pugs Moran. I do the High Noon Rant every day at noon. Non-political, current events driven hot talk by a guy with hot opinions that, radio doesn't allow. Radio doesn't allow because I don't take a political side. I'm just kind of right in the middle. I don't even like to talk about politics. I'd rather talk about, pro athletes behaving badly or how the rich are getting richer and we're all getting ripped off. But there's no place for that in radio. So we're here on the stream every Monday through Friday, 12 p.m., the High Noon Rant with me, Pugs Moran, on the Radio Misfits podcast platform. Check them out for all your podcast needs. All right. So again, recapping, because this is a different video. So about a week ago, I ended up watching The Right Stuff on YouTube. Very important. All Gen Xers know, very important movie to us. I will once again sort of explain my mindset as to why these things are so incredibly mesmerizing to me. It's because of when I was raised and, before I understood anything about the world, I understood that I could be vaporized in the blink of an eye because of some people on the other side of the world who didn't like us and they were the enemy and don't ask any questions. What are you, a communist? That's the world I was raised in. That was the development of my early understanding of how the world worked, that nothing mattered and that it was all going to be over in the blink of an eye. I used to talk about these things in therapy, but I don't go to therapy anymore. Probably should. Instead, I stream when we talk about it here. As I say, I appreciate how this is. This is group therapy for me. So I watched The Right Stuff, and then I fell into like a bunny hole. Wikipedia, I went deep in Wikipedia. I went deep on YouTube, and I'm watching all of these videos about, well, honestly, it's anything about, what it's going to be like when the world ends, how World War III almost started in the past. I'm just watching all these things, but there is a subgenre of this that I've really sort of been drawn to. And it's because of this angst, this anxiety that was ever present in my childhood growing up. And it is the bombs are in the air, they're about to fall simulation on YouTube. And there are some good ones. We watched in an earlier video, and when I say earlier, literally a couple of minutes ago, we watched what it would be like here in the United States if Russia sort of waged a full all-out attack. And that was really a concentration on what the EAS will actually look like. That's the emergency alert system. We know what that is. That's the thing. This is only a test. If this had been an actual test, that's what we know. And thankfully, we're better off that that's all that we know. But what these simulations do is they show us what happens when it's not a test. So we watched that video. You can find that as well if you follow and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. It's down there in the Pugs and Company list. I think it's titled something about World War III. I don't know. I should be better at this by now. Hell, we've been doing this every day for 2.5, almost 3 years. Now that one, as I say, that one really focused on what the EAS system here in America is going to look like. This next one we're going to do, this next one's fun. This next one is better. This next one I love. And it's a bit longer. And we're not going to watch it all because it's ridiculously long. We're going to skip through it. I'm just going to get to certain points. But what this one does is that it shows us how the hours preceding the bombs being launched are going to play out on TV. And this is the BBC doing it. So it's from their perspective. So, and if you listen to the rant, you know that I watch a lot of BBC because their morning shows are on when I'm going to bed, and their morning shows are really nice to fall asleep to, which must speak to where my mind is at these days. Because as I say, I have been falling asleep to these fake nuclear war simulations recently. That's recently where my head is at. Now, this one is the BBC. We're going to watch. Here's the premise. I'm going to set it up for you. Apparently, they are covering a George Bush speech, former president of the United States, George Bush. They're covering one of his speeches, and they interrupt his speech with this breaking news. Also, this one is modern. This one, and it should be noted that the BBC created this before Russia had invaded the Ukraine. Okay. This was all done before. This is what's going to happen if, Putin expansionism, occurs in Europe, and God forbid he tries to take all of Ukraine. This is what's going. So understanding that, and they'll mention President Trump. This was made when Trump was still president. They'll mention Michael Flynn. I guess it was made briefly when he was whatever it was that he was. So yeah, okay, so that's all you need to know. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you need to know. So this takes place in relatively modern times, and it does occur before Russia invaded the Ukraine, because Russia invading Ukraine is a very big player in how this plays out. So here we go. Remember, BBC coverage of how World War III is going to start, and basically takes us right up to the moment the bombs destroy London. Here we go.
Are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia, and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, anyway. 75.
We're interrupting normal programming to join the BBC News Desk for some breaking news.
All right, so here we go. Right now, this may look unfamiliar to you, but like I said, I watch a lot of BBC because it's on late at night, and I like their chat shows, their morning shows. So this is legitimately how the BBC presents news, and it's also why I like the BBC for real news, because it's not Jim Acosta or Jesse Waters or whatever. It's people just giving you facts. So here we go. It's starting. They just interrupted President Bush.
News.
Yeah, serious news.
Welcome to the BBC News Desk. We have breaking news of a serious incident between Russian and NATO forces near the coast of Latvia. Although the details are uncertain, early reports indicate that a Russian surveillance aircraft was fired upon by naval vessels of NATO forces operating in that region, after apparently straying into Latvian sovereign airspace. It's unclear at this stage whether the Russian aircraft was shot down or not. This incident comes in the wake of a similar event some time ago, in which 2 Russian pilots were killed after being shot down by Turkish surface-to-air missiles near the border with Syria. It's not known what caused this latest incident or at exactly what time the conflict took place, but it is believed that it happened earlier today and that Russian forces have returned fire. The government has convened a meeting of the Emergency Cobra Committee, and senior members of the British military have been seen entering 10 Downing Street. There were chaotic scenes earlier today as Prime Minister Theresa May was rushed back to Downing Street as details of the international crisis began to emerge. She had been due to attend a meeting with senior business leaders in the city today, followed by a cross-party governmental committee meeting on electoral reform. But these plans have been cancelled in light of current developments.
All right, so let's recap here just for a minute. What we have just learned here, this is how the BBC is going to break it to the world, that a shooting war has started between NATO forces and Russia. All right, it seems that it began a couple of days ago with Turkish surface-to-air missiles shooting down 2 Russian jets that had strayed into their area. So that causes the tensions to be a little bit ratcheted up. But now what they're breaking in with is news of NATO forces, NATO ships have now fired upon what is being called Russian reconnaissance aircraft that have strayed somewhere. We're also learning now that Russian military has fired back at NATO. So we're in a hot war. This is the great nightmare that NATO and Russia are at some point going to pull their triggers. And this is what's happening. And this is the news that is going to kick off World War III. Here we go.
News of the outbreak of military action between Russia and NATO has been greeted across the globe with expressions of concern and alarm. There are unconfirmed reports that Russian forces have retaliated by engaging in direct fire against several NATO warships. 2 US cruisers, the USS Princeton and the USS Gettysburg, are reported to be in the region, but it's not known if they were directly involved in the incident. The Ministry of Defence has yet to confirm these reports, stating that the situation is changing rapidly and that they'd be making a formal statement in due course, but acknowledging that something very serious has happened. In Europe, senior military leaders have been meeting at regional NATO headquarters, indicating that...
Don't you take it more seriously? Aren't you? Something very serious has occurred. I mean, it just sounds, it's more, I believe it more than I believe, Judge Jean or whoever. Who's CNN going to trot out to tell us about the end of days that are... We going to get Gayle King and Charles Barkley on that one? These British people, they just seem like, if I gotta live the last couple of hours on this earth being informed about my ultimate demise, I would like it being delivered by this woman. Oh, and by the way, Chuckles in the chat room, I think it's Chuckles who said they don't have the annoying emergency alert system. Oh, hold on, dude. The bombs haven't been launched yet. What do you see what the Brits are rocking? Okay, you'll see. It's coming.
warranted Russian aggression is being planned. A general military alert has been issued across Europe, including the deployment of over 50,000 NATO troops to key points along the central border to Russia, and the activation of over 200,000 reserve troops from France, Germany, Holland and the UK. The first contingent of British troops has already left RAF Brize Norton. All military leave has been cancelled, and the mobilisation of all British forces nationally and internationally has been ordered by the government. And we're just receiving reports that at least one NATO warship has sustained serious damage as a result of direct fire from Russian forces. Details are unclear and the number of casualties remains unknown, but it's reported that at least one vessel has been sunk with major loss of life and that contact has been lost with a further 2 ships in the area. The US President Donald...
All right, now that's pretty important. That's pretty important stuff, that they just upped the ante a little bit. Now we know that the Russians didn't just fire back on our ships, but there are reports that they have sunk a United States Navy ship while working under a NATO flag. They have sunk one, and there are 2 more that they've lost all. So this is really turning into something here. And we're seeing, I love that. Here's what's so great about this presentation. They're showing us stock news footage that they have access to, but they're presenting it under a narrative of something completely different. So it's working. My point is, it's working. If you're just watching this, your heart should be going a little bit because they're doing it so well. Let's continue.
Trump has condemned the Russian military action. The US President Donald Trump has condemned the Russian military action, calling on President Putin to pull back from what the US government has described as a reckless and warlike posture which can only lead to greater conflict. World leaders have expressed their condemnation of Russian military action, stating their support for US and NATO forces and their hope that a peaceful, negotiated settlement of the conflict can be achieved. The Pentagon has convened a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and a worldwide military alert has been declared for all US forces with immediate effect. We'll be bringing you further information on the US response to the situation as details emerge.
Please do.
The conflict in the Baltic Sea continues to escalate, with reports that a number of Royal Navy vessels have joined the battle. It's believed that HMS Lancaster and HMS Duncan are leading the British response, and that HMS Northumberland is en route to provide additional support. The Royal Navy Trafalgar-class submarine HMS Torbay is believed to be in the region, but it is not clear whether it's involved in the conflict. The Ministry of Defence has declined to comment, stating that the military response to the situation would be proportionate, but that it would not be appropriate to discuss any details thereafter. Several destroyers from the Russian Baltic Fleet have been spotted near the coast of Finland, indicating a potential major escalation in the scale of the conflict and increasing fears that the fighting may get out of hand before a political solution can be negotiated. In response to global condemnation of Russian military action, President Putin has stated that Russia will use whatever means are necessary to defend itself, including the use of its strategic military capabilities. Russian forces are already at a heightened state of combat readiness following significant military exercises over recent months and the deployment of the Russian S-400 advanced surface-to-air missile system along the central border between Russia and Western Europe.
Reporting restrictions have been imposed due to the sensitivity of divulging troop movements, but we're hoping for an update from our local reporters in the region and from other news networks in due course.
We can now go to our senior military correspondent, retired Army General and ex-head of British Armed Forces, Sir Norman Fairchild.
Sir Norman Fairchild, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know who this guy is. He might have been the idiot behind the Falklands War for all I know. But this guy right now, he's coming in. Check this out. This isn't like, some disgraced general from some scandalous political, or presidential administration. No, this is Sir Norman. Sir Norman's going to tell us. I love Sir Norman.
Who's been closely monitoring the situation. Thank you for joining us, Sir Norman. Firstly, can you give us your assessment of the situation and where you think things might go from here?
Well, this is clearly a very serious situation.
All right, wait a second. I also want to say this about Sir Norman. I love how they don't have him on camera because this is breaking news and all he can do. I'm surprised he's not on the phone. That's what they do when it's really, really breaking news. But okay, let's hear what Sir Norman has to say because I don't even know if Sir Norman Fairchild is a real dude. Somebody in the chat room, Google him. Let me know if Sir Norman Fairchild is a real dude, a real British defense expert. Because all the other names are real.
Thank you for joining us, Sir Norman. Firstly, can you give us your assessment of the situation and where you think things might go from here?
Well, this is clearly a very serious situation, but one I have to say that might have been foreseen. It has been clear for some time that there's been a more fundamental tension between Russia and the West regarding the encroachment of NATO forces and defense systems upon the Russian border and historical territory, so this possibly has been coming for some time. The conflict in the Ukraine and in Syria has significantly increased the likelihood from the various forces would come into direct conflict at some stage, and this is certainly something that many people feared might happen.
So is this possibly something that Russia has been planning for?
Well, I think we need to bear in mind that Russian forces have been building their military strength for a number of years, investing heavily in advanced technology and having a level of war readiness that few countries could claim. We have seen several large-scale military exercises by Russian forces, which of course is a convenient way of disguising the deployment and positioning of its military assets, and they of course know that Western forces are...
All right, breaking news, ladies and gentlemen, breaking news thanks to the participation of our incredible chat room producers, both Chuckles Nelson and April. I regret to inform you that Sir Norman is not a real person. Yeah, apparently Sir Norman's not real. That's unfortunate. But I choose to live in a world where Sir Norman is going to give me the latest breaking breakdowns of how World War III begins. That's the world I choose to live in. Let's go back. Oh, whoa, what just happened there? That ain't good. That ain't fun. Hold on.
Already fully committed in various conflicts in the Middle East. I have to say that I'm not convinced that this particular episode, as serious as it is in itself, is the full picture. I believe that this is part of something much bigger and is more likely, in fact, to be a diversion from Russia's true military intent, which remains to be seen.
We've seen that the government has passed the Emergency Powers Act. Most people will be unfamiliar with what this means. So can you tell us what the significance of this is in military terms?
The significance really is twofold. The first is the level of readiness it brings, preparing the country for a state of war and bringing all British armed forces to the highest possible levels of planning and preparation. This necessarily includes the British strategic nuclear deterrent. This, of course, has never happened before, so how quickly and effectively we can respond remains to be seen. But clearly, there is a real urgency now due to the severity of the crisis. The second and possibly more serious implication is that it tells us that our intelligence services have assessed the threat as being very dangerous, so they clearly know that something is up.
In the UK, the mobilisation of the armed forces is continuing.
All right, Sir Norman, well played, sir. Something is up. All right, so now we're going to look at raw video from the English countryside of unprecedented troop movements. This is indicating that there's a full mobilization going on, and
with a full recall of all reserve forces and heightened security at military bases and airfields. Typhoon fighter jets from 29 Squadron at RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire and 6 Squadron at RAF Lossiemouth in Scotland have begun patrolling UK airspace, and restrictions on civilian and commercial air traffic have been imposed around military and nuclear power facilities.
okay, but the airports are still open. Sounds like we haven't interrupted, so it's not that serious. That's when you know it's serious. When they ground all flights, all commercial air travel is halted. That's when we know it's serious.
The Ministry of Defence has ordered the dispersal of key military forces and strategic bomber aircraft to various bases across the country, and the British submarine fleet has left the naval bases at Faslane in Scotland and from Plymouth on the south coast. Traffic restrictions have been reported on certain motorways and access points, causing tailbacks in many areas and bringing traffic to a virtual standstill on
tailbacks. That's what they call traffic jams. They call them tailbacks.
Parts of the M25.
Because they don't have NFL football.
Emergency services and hospitals in the UK have also been placed on high alert. A senior spokesperson for the NHS has stated that it's important the UK is prepared for any eventuality, but that this should not be a cause of undue concern.
And just to recap on the main points so far.
All right, hold on. Before we recap, isn't that very British? Don't worry. There's no reason for concern. What is their thing? Carry on, don't panic. I don't know, whatever their thing is.
Serious incident has been reported between Russian and NATO military forces in the Baltic Sea, apparently resulting in direct fire from Russian warships against US and British naval forces, resulting in the loss of at least one naval vessel, and with casualties now exceeding over 200 troops killed and several hundred more either injured or unaccounted for. It's not clear when the first incident took place, but it appears that sometime earlier today, a Russian surveillance aircraft was fired upon by NATO forces after apparently entering Latvian sovereign airspace. It's not known whether the Russian aircraft was shot down, and the Russian government so far has neither confirmed nor denied that this incident took place.
Downing Street has confirmed that all parliamentary sessions have been suspended for today and that heightened security measures have been put in place around major governmental and military facilities. Reporting restrictions have also been imposed on all major news networks, reflecting what the government described as a sensitive and volatile situation which represents a substantial and immediate threat to our national security. And with the latest report from the conflict, it's...
See that? See what it says there? Russian frigate Nustrasfami sunk by anti-ship missile fired by HMS Duncan. That sounds so British. Oh, well, the HMS makes it sound British. But you know what I mean? Just Duncan. Like, well, we would never have the SS Duncan. Well, maybe we would. I don't know. This one just sounds British.
Believed that a Russian guided missile destroyer has been hit by a missile fired by the British naval fleet, apparently sustaining major damage with many casualties.
Okay.
Heavy fires on board have been reported as NATO forces continue to retaliate. Russian search and rescue vessels are on the scene with additional support en route from their Baltic fleet, who are expected to arrive in the region shortly.
So I guess at this point, right, if we're watching this unfold on TV, at this point, here's what we have to hope for. So we've got to fully embrace the idea that we are in a land war right now and a sea war with Putin, with Russia, or whomever their allies are going to be. We are in a war. The war has started. We are in a war. Now, we're looking for a bright side of that. What we still have is that we've not heard any mention of use of any kind of nuclear weapon. We haven't. Whether it's, certainly not, ICBMs, certainly a tactical, but also battlefield. There are battlefield nukes. There are nukes that will be deployed not just to level a city, but to achieve a military accomplishment or a military goal inside a battle. Battlefield nukes are real. So we haven't heard that. So it can get worse, is my point, as we watch this unfold. It can get worse. It has not gotten worse yet. Let's see what happens.
And we do now have footage of the conflict from the region. This is the scene of Russian warships based directly off the coast of Finland. These are truly extraordinary scenes. Russian warships firing directly at US and British forces from NATO in what now must surely represent a state of war.
All right, so those are supposed to be the Russian ships firing at NATO ships.
We expect to receive a statement from Downing Street shortly about the escalating crisis and how British and international forces plan to respond to the situation.
That's a cool shot.
And we've just
Kudos to the BBC. They did a good job with this.
heard that the government has passed the Emergency Powers Act, bringing the country into a formal state of war preparation and suspending many peacetime activities and functions. Central government in the UK has been suspended, and power has now been passed instead to a system of local officials dispersed across the country. Emergency response and civil defence authorities have been placed on the highest level of alert.
What could go wrong there? I mean, we find ourselves in that situation here in America, and all of a sudden, you know, your weird crackpot and a 19-year-old mayor is now suddenly the law of the land in a post-apocalyptic world that's desperately trying to hang on to some semblance of democracy and justice. You know, this is how you get like what was that show? Walking Dead, you know, where people are forming their own kingdoms because they were the postmaster of their local town when this shit hit the fan.
And preparations are underway in case the UK itself comes under direct attack. And let's go live to NATO regional headquarters in Brussels, where defence and foreign ministers from various NATO member countries and their allies continue to arrive. One of the early arrivals is the Belgian Minister of Defence, Steven van der Puut, joining his counterparts from a growing number of NATO member countries and their allies.
Hold on, guys.
And
Let me
we
do something real
see
quick.
the arrival of representatives
Let
of
me,
the...
yeah. Let me get rid of that real quick.
Yes, we believe that this is Michael Zilmer-Johns, the Danish ambassador to NATO.
Hold on one second, guys. Okay, sorry. I want to go back to I needed to change windows real quick. All right, so here's what we're looking at. This is NATO headquarters. This is in Brussels, and all of the top dudes around Europe who are member nation, you know, NATO members, they're all getting together for an emergency session right there. They're all getting together in one place.
Of the Danish government.
Here
Yes, we believe that
Viking.
this is Michael Zilmer-Johns, the Danish ambassador to NATO.
These are the Vikings. These are the Danes. These are the descendants of Vikings. You got to go to war. These are probably good people to have on your side.
And in the latest update on the conflict, fighter and surveillance quick reaction alert aircraft have left NATO combined air operations centres in Germany and Holland, as well as from NATO air force bases in the Baltic countries. There are reports that Russian heavy bombers have attacked the main NATO air force base in Lithuania, apparently resulting in heavy damage with many casualties. We understand that this is where combined forces from France, Spain and Portugal are based, mainly Typhoon and Mirage fighter jets. We're waiting to hear of any further news on this, but we understand that the attack is ongoing and that Dutch F-16s based out of Malbork in Poland, as well as British Typhoon fighter jets of the Royal Air Force based in Amari in Estonia, are responding.
None of this stuff means anything to me, but because it's being told to me in a British accent, I'm like, yeah, well, that's big news. That's an escalation.
Clearly, something major is underway here in Europe as NATO plans its response. And we have another arrival. The security here is very heavy. There are armed officers surrounding the area. And this is the German Minister of Defense, Ursula von der Leyen, speaking with senior military...
That's a made-up name. Ursula von der Leyen.
Commanders.
Although I bet she's a real person. Somebody look her up in the chat room. Ursula von der Leyen, because they're not going to show, I mean, they've shown real people. This is file footage. Like, people in Europe probably know who she is. She's probably higher profile than she is here, in America. I bet Ursula von der Leyen, Defense Secretary of Germany or whatever. She looks like somebody who would work under Merkel, right? This was probably back in the. She looks like a Merkel hire.
We get a real sense of the seriousness of the situation. And again, not wanting to address waiting reporters. And we'll come back to NATO headquarters in Brussels. We expect the British Secretary of Defence to arrive there shortly. But for the moment, let's go back to Kate Miller to see what the latest developments are. Kate.
Thanks, John. An estimated 15,000 NATO troops are stationed in the Baltic states, making it unlikely that any significant defence of the territory can be achieved.
Oh.
In New York, an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council is underway, and the Russian ambassador to the United States is currently meeting with senior officials at the White House in what's being described as a frank and earnest exchange of views about the growing international crisis. In Moscow, Russian President Vladimir...
Okay, I'm just saying. Remember earlier I said, during the missile crisis, Cuban Missile Crisis, what we know now through the luxury of history is that both Kennedy and Khrushchev were incredibly serious when it came to the use and deployment of nuclear weapons. They were horrified by it. These were people who were alive and, in the war when they were used in Japan. I mean, I'm not saying they were there, but what I'm saying is that generation, especially people like Kennedy and Khrushchev, who would ascend to the top jobs of their nations, I'm sure that they have some deeper understanding of what war is in general and what the nuclear devastation is. So they were both well known, well documented at this point in history, that the reason the Cuban Missile Crisis didn't happen was because neither Kennedy nor Khrushchev had the will to go through with it. And at some point, the two men figured this out about each other and just said, let's just go home. You guys turn around, you go back. Let's just walk away from this. Now, I bring this up because that was a time during our Cold War history when they say we were, the closest to this turning into an actual World War III. And those two guys, and again, through the luxury of history, we don't know. Those two guys have been viewed as just the absolute perfect people to be in that position at that time. Thank God that it was those two men. They just told us, that like the Russian ambassador or whatever, he's showing up at the White House. I mean, it's Trump. Look, again, I'm not political, but I don't think that he's the velvet glove that you need in these moments where humility and some level of sincere communication between two world leaders is needed. I don't know. That's why I worry about today. I'm not saying Biden would be better. He might fall asleep in the middle of the meeting. I'm just saying I just don't think we're situated to avoid the next time something like the Cuban Missile Crisis happens. All right, let's go back here. So again, the Russian ambassador is now coming to the White House. I'm going to talk to Trump.
Vladimir Putin has defended the actions of his military forces, stating that Russia has been provoked beyond measure by years of political and military encroachment by Western nations, and that the time had come to assert its right to defend legitimate cultural and political interests in former Soviet countries. It's not known whether the US president has had any direct contact with his Russian counterpart, or whether the so-called hotline between the White House and the Kremlin, in place since the Cuban Missile Crisis, has been used since the conflict started. The US President, the US Secretary of State, plus a number of other key political and military leaders have left Andrews Air Force Base in Air Force One and are likely to remain airborne until the crisis is stabilised. NORAD has declared DEFCON...
All right, now that's some shit. There we go. Now we have crossed a Rubicon of sorts. When I hear news that the president and the Joint Chiefs, all these important people are now in Air Force One and they're staying airborne for the foreseeable future, I know there hasn't been any notice or mention of the use of nuclear weapons anywhere in this conflict so far. But that's some bullshit. That's where I go, oh, Jesus, here we go. I guess we really are going to die. Because they're not going to pull that move until they're really sure that this is probably going to happen.
2, bringing all American strategic nuclear forces to a high state of readiness and sending America's strategic bomber wings to their assigned fail-safe points across the globe. All remaining vessels of the US submarine fleet have sailed from their bases, joining an already substantial contingent of naval vessels in international...
All right, so we're at DEFCON 2, right? DEFCON 2 alert. By the way, probably needs to be mentioned that DEFCON 1 is like the worst. That's when you don't want to get to. A lot of people are like, it was bad. It was DEFCON 5. Like, okay, so it's not bad at all. Not really. People think that the higher the number goes, the more serious. No, so we're at DEFCON 2. This is pretty bad. That means nothing's been fired yet, but we are waiting.
National waters.
Let's go back to NATO regional headquarters in Brussels. These were the scenes of...
All right, so we just learned about the German lady. Thank you to Chuck Nelson in the chat room. He found out that German lady, what was her name? Gertrude Birkenstern? I don't know what her name was. I forgot. But apparently she's a real person. She's the German defense secretary. Says she is a real person that is the current president of the European Commission. Okay, very good. Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate you.
A few moments ago, the British Secretary of State for Defence, the Right Honourable Michael Fallon MP, in Brussels, originally to chair a NATO committee on defence planning, but now arriving at this emergency meeting of international NATO leaders.
Imagine we existed in a culture and a society where we had to say shit like the Right Honorable Matt Gaetz, or the Right Honorable Ilhan Omar, or, Jesus, the pretense of these people.
Many of the government ministers and representatives we see today were already in Brussels for various NATO Council meetings. Others have been rushed here to join the emergency session of senior military and political leaders. Sources at the Pentagon are suggesting that a major strategic confrontation with Russia might be a real possibility. NATO has been moving their forces closer and closer to Russia over the past few years. And activating the Aegis missile system in both Poland and Romania very recently has caused serious consternation in Russia because of what they see as a first strike capability right on their doorstep. So they see NATO as the aggressor here. The number of NATO warships and armed forces currently positioned in the Baltic.
Could we take a minute on that one? Can we just for fun, just all us girls here hanging out in the chat room? Russia sees NATO nations, NATO forces, right there on their borders, because the country that's right next to them is a NATO member. There is no Warsaw Pact anymore. Russia's pretty much out there all by themselves. NATO is still around. Warsaw Pact, not so much. So, I mean, is there a legit concern on the part of Putin? Does he have a real complaint? Hey, you got all of your missiles pointed at me right on my border. I mean, I guess from an American standpoint, we have the luxury of being at least geographically isolated in this regard. I mean, I guess they could come in through Alaska, but how much of a fight are we going to put up for Alaska? Okay. I don't know. Like I kind of get that. Like I kind of understand. Like, remember how hard we freaked out when they were going to put missiles in Cuba? I mean, we've got missiles all over Europe. We had missiles in West Germany that were aimed right across the wall at East Germany, which was a part of the Warsaw Pact. So, I mean, I don't know. I think if we're being fair, he's kind of got an argument there. Although, I guess the counter would be, well, we're only there because you're kind of a bad guy. And he's like, I'm not the bad guy. I just want my Soviet empire back. Then we get moose and squirrel. Hey, Bullwinkle. See, I was making a Bullwinkle line there. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because we can't just be jingoistic about this. We're about to fall into World War III. Does he have any kind of an argument? I say, kind of. I say, okay, so let's talk about it. I don't know. Here we go.
Region. And activating the Aegis missile system in both Poland and Romania very recently has caused serious consternation in Russia because of what they see as a first strike capability right on their doorstep. So they see NATO as the aggressor here. The number of NATO warships and armed forces currently positioned in the Baltic region.
I mean, okay, let me put it to you this way. So what if Russia forms an alliance with with Mexico, and Russia just, decides to put a whole bunch of missiles or these Aegis missile systems all over like Mexico, Tijuana, we'd freak out. We would totally freak out. At that point, we'd be like, they got to be stopped. So I'm not saying that Putin is a reasonable guy. God, you know that. If you listen to the High Noon Rant every day, you know that I am no Putin guy. But, you can understand why they would have a different mindset about all of this, a more aggressive one than maybe we would here in America as an American who, we shit the bed when they were going to put them in Cuba. We put an end to that right away. Canada. Imagine Canada falls. Canada becomes buddies with Russia. All of a sudden, Toronto's got a bunch of missiles aimed at Chicago and Detroit. They don't even have to be intercontinental. They could just be regular ass missiles, these missile systems. So, very complicated, but let's keep watching. We're watching World War III play out, the start of it, as seen through the lens of the BBC.
Suggest that NATO possibly knew that something might happen. These events come after a rather grand and elaborate ceremony in Moscow yesterday, in which President Putin made something of a rhetorical speech about the right of Russia to reclaim its interests in former Soviet Union countries and to protect itself from the growing political and military influence of NATO. Nobody really paid much attention to this ceremony at the time.
That's one of the more chilling things that I found about this. And again, I won't interrupt again. We're going to let it play out now for a little bit. But I wanted to get to the Putin stuff because remember, folks, this was created by the BBC before Putin invaded Ukraine. Okay. All of the things that they are ascribing to Putin having said in response to this fictional scenario are things that he is saying now. They are the exact same saber-rattling type things that he is saying now. So that's why on the High Noon Show, I've been like, guys, again, this was in 2016 when they made this. This is long before. So now we're going to start to see things that are happening that we're actually seeing happening in the Ukraine war now. This was before that.
But it's certainly beginning to take on a new significance in light of current events. Russian state television has been broadcasting extraordinary scenes.
We got to go back to that. Why do other countries, we've got some pretty shameless politicians. Why do other countries have such pomp? Why are they allowed to be so flamboyant? Look at these doors.
The military influence of NATO.
Look at the gold there.
Nobody really paid much attention to this ceremony at the time, but it's...
Look at that. Look at the way these guys are walking in the doors. Could you imagine? No wonder Putin's a madman. Every room he walks into, he gets this kind of treatment.
Certainly beginning to take on a new significance in light of current events. Russian state television has been broadcasting extraordinary scenes of President Putin personally directing military operations from a command center. This looks highly organized and certainly suggests that the conflict was not just a spontaneous act. Clearly a lot of planning has gone into this. Let's listen in for a few moments. This is not live, but was broadcast within the last 30 minutes.
Mr. Commander-in-Chief, in accordance with your decision, as of today, the group of long-range bombers 222 delivered a group airstrikes on 6 targets from the Mozdok airfield. Following their landing, they prepared for a repeated sortie. The wings took flight again to deliver another group airstrike, and up to 1700 hours they delivered strikes on 6 enemy targets. As of now, the aircraft are returning to the airfield. The crews and the hardware are working normally. Mr. Commander-in-Chief, our personnel of our operations group is prepared to carry out the missions to protect the Russian Federation and its citizens.
And just to recap quickly on the main points so far, things have been moving very quickly from what started earlier today as a rumour that NATO forces had fired on a Russian surveillance aircraft, to a situation where Russian forces are engaging in ongoing heavy combat with combined forces from different countries in the NATO alliance. China has advised NATO to use caution in the way it responds to the ongoing situation in Europe. A spokesman from the US State Department has confirmed that Chinese officials have also warned the US against any military activity in the South China Sea from its bases in the Philippines, stating that any such action would be interpreted as an act of aggression and would be dealt with accordingly. North Korea has declared its support for Russia and has begun mobilizing.
All right, this is one of the scenes that kind of took me out a little bit because the BBC has done a great job of using file footage to sort of depict what would be happening here. This woman doesn't look like we're on the verge of nuclear war. See this lady? She enters, she smiles, she's kind of like, hey, watch this lady again. This kind of took me out a little bit.
Advised NATO to use caution in the way it responds to the ongoing situation in Europe. A spokesman from the US State Department has confirmed that Chinese officials have also warned the US against any military activity in the South China Sea from its bases in the Philippines, stating that any such action would be interpreted as an act of aggression and would be dealt with accordingly. North Korea has declared its support for Russia and has...
She's too cute. She's too cute for this moment in history. That's, look at a little smile. Look at her. The little pixie haircut.
dealt with accordingly.
Hey, the world's gonna...
North Korea has declared its support for Russia and has begun mobilizing an estimated 300,000 troops along the border to South Korea.
Do you see what's happening? North Korea's involved. North Korea's getting ready to involve South Korea right now while the whole world is distracted by what's happening with Putin and NATO.
Increasing concerns that the growing military crisis in Europe will spread to other international locations. The governments of South Korea and Japan have expressed their concern at the increasingly belligerent statements of the North Korean government, stating that the nuclear capabilities of North Korea remain unknown, but represent an immediate and significant threat. There are reports of massive troop movements within Russia, and there are real concerns that this conflict might escalate rapidly. Reuters news agency has reported that the much-feared Topol-M mobile missile launchers are being moved into strategic positions along the central frontier to Europe, so Russia is sending a very clear signal to NATO's Central Command.
And in breaking news, Buckingham Palace has announced that the Queen and senior members of the royal family have been evacuated to a secure location outside London. No details have been given, and
Now it's getting serious. They're moving the Queen. They're moving the whole royal family. The president's in an airplane circling the United States safely. Some shit's about to go down. North Korea is about to invade South Korea. That's going to be a shooting war. Here we go, folks. Buckle up.
took place, but sources indicate
Churches are being moved into strategic positions along the central frontier to Europe, so Russia is sending a very clear signal to NATO's Central Command.
And in breaking news, Buckingham Palace has announced that the Queen and senior members of the royal family have been evacuated to a secure location outside London. No details have been given, and it's not clear when exactly the evacuation took place, but sources indicate that the decision was based on advice from the Defence Secretary, who's currently attending an emergency session of senior NATO military leaders in Brussels.
I got a hotline call from the Defense Secretary, who's meeting right there in Brussels. He knows everything. Got a hotline call to the Queen, said, "Get the old lady out of here."
The Queen is apparently fully aware of the honour of senior NATO based on advice from the Defence.
So it's supposed to be the Queen's motorcade, I guess. That's what they're trying to present this as. Was the Queen rolling around in? She in one of these Range Rovers or one of these normal cars?
Secretary, who's currently attending an emergency session of senior NATO military leaders in Brussels. The Queen is apparently fully aware of the ongoing...
They're letting us think that she's rolling around in a BMW, like a soccer mom from Southlake.
situation and is being kept informed of developments as they occur.
What's that? That's another one of the, is that a Discovery? That's a Range Rover. Why is there no coordination of coloring? Why is that a green Land Rover Discovery? A British racing green. Why is that a British racing green Land Rover Discovery with a whole bunch of black cars?
Buckingham Palace has said that they will not be issuing a formal statement beyond this announcement, but that they urged people to remain calm and to monitor the situation closely. Large-scale evacuations have already been reported in Warsaw and Krakow, prompting fears that the movement of people away from major cities might interfere with the deployment of troops and military vehicles to key defence positions. All civilian and commercial air traffic in the region has been suspended, and emergency civil defence measures have been initiated by the Polish government.
And we're now going live to Brussels for a statement from NATO regional headquarters. Let's listen into this live broadcast.
The Secretary General will start and then we'll be able to take a few questions. Secretary General.
The security environment in which we meet today is dark. This nuclear saber rattling of Russia is unjustified, it's destabilizing, and it's dangerous. And this is something which we are addressing, and it's also one of the reasons why we now are increasing the readiness and the preparedness of our forces, and we are responding by making sure that NATO also in the future is an alliance which provides deterrence and protection for all allies against any threat.
All right.
And we'll be returning to that conversation.
So, want to answer in the chat room a couple of questions. The name of this, if you wanted to watch it on your own, I think Mike asked this. The name of this is just, I guess, go to YouTube and search World War III BBC News Report. That's kind of how I find it. All right.
Against any deterrence and protection for all allies against any threat.
And we'll be returning to that conversation in a few moments. We interrupt to bring you news that the Ministry of Defence has reported what it refers to as a number of large order detonations in the seas off the coasts of Estonia and Latvia. No details or confirmation of these.
All right. Large order detonations. They still ain't saying the N-word. There's still ain't nobody mentioned the N-word, but
reports attributed to local NATO observers have been received as yet, but it's understood that one of these attacks was targeted against key supply vessels carrying fuel and ammunition to NATO forces. We believe that there is footage of the attack from a military observation vessel, and we hope to have that shortly. In further breaking news...
you damn teases! We believe there's footage of it. You led us to think we were about to see it. No, it's coming shortly. I cannot commend the BBC editors or whatever. They put this together. This looks so good. It's this is all real existing file footage that they're repurposing to reinforce this narrative, this horrifying narrative.
The government has taken control of British Airways, all cross-channel ferries, and the Channel Tunnel. They say,
all right, there you go. That's a big one. Remember, I said we were going to wait to see if they were going to ground commercial air. Well, I guess they moved right past that and have nationalized the airplane for the airlines for troop movements. You got to get every Virgin plane, every British Airways plane. You forget about it. I don't care. Where were you going? You're going to Sydney? You're not going to Sydney anymore. We got to move these troops to Latvia in the next hour. Whew.
It's a temporary step to help move troops and equipment to Europe. Thousands are currently stranded at Heathrow and Gatwick, and the Royal Navy has also been deployed to guard the North Sea oil rigs. The MOD have described this as a prudent, precautionary measure.
A number of American B-52 long-range bomber aircraft have been seen leaving RAF Fairford, a primary forward staging base for United States Air Force strategic assets in the UK. It's not clear whether they're equipped with nuclear weapons, but a senior US military spokesperson has stated that a non-conventional military response may be required and that they needed to be prepared for any eventuality. American AWACS surveillance, along with several airborne refuelling aircraft, have also left Aviano Air Force Base in Italy to support military operations in the region. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, and senior members of Cabinet are directing emergency operations from an undisclosed location outside of London, along with the head of British Armed Forces and other senior military leaders. In the UK, military and civilian authorities are continuing their preparations to respond to the growing crisis. All non-essential and elective surgeries have been cancelled by the NHS, and hospitals are being cleared of non-critical patients to make way for potential casualties in the event of a wider conflict. The Ministry of Defence has refused to comment on rumours that Russian forces have used tactical nuclear weapons against British and US naval forces in the Baltic.
All right, there we are. All right, so there's the first mention. We're starting to hear rumors that on the battlefield, they're using battlefield nukes. Apparently, this report coming from the BBC is informing us that nobody's commenting on it, but there are widespread rumors that there are battlefield nukes being used. Oh,
in
sorry,
session,
guys. Here
but
we
we
go.
understand that
That
a
was
full
apologize for that.
an alliance which
vessel
But a senior US military spokesperson has stated that a non-conventional military response may be required and that they needed to be prepared for any eventuality. American AWACS surveillance, along with several airborne refuelling aircraft, have also left Aviano Air Force Base in Italy to support military operations in the region. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, and senior members of Cabinet are directing emergency operations from an undisclosed location outside of London, along with the head of British Armed Forces and other senior military leaders. In the UK, military and civilian authorities are continuing their preparations to respond to the growing crisis. All non-essential and elective surgeries have been cancelled by the NHS, and hospitals are being cleared of
Sorry, sweetie, but your boob job is going to have to wait.
non-critical patients to make way for potential casualties in the event of a wider conflict. The Ministry of Defence has refused to comment on rumours that Russian forces have used tactical nuclear weapons against British and US naval forces in the Baltic Sea.
The United States has continued to respond to the growing international crisis. The meeting of the US President and the Joint Chiefs of Staff is still in session, but we understand that a full mobilization of US military forces is underway internationally and that all military leave has been cancelled. B-2 stealth bombers have been seen leaving Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri some time ago, and all military bases in Europe and the Middle East have been placed on high alert. We've just received footage of one of the attacks against NATO warships, apparently taken from a stationary camera on board a NATO observation vessel, which was sailing close to a supply convoy carrying supplies of fuel, ammunition and military equipment. If we can roll the tape, you'll see a distant view of the supply convoy, partially masked by one of the fuel tankers in the foreground, a couple of kilometres or so away from the camera. What happens then is just incredible. It seems to be a huge detonation underwater. The blast itself was about half a mile wide and must have wiped out at least a dozen vessels in one go. Let's go straight to our military expert for his view on this incredible footage. Can you
That looks like something. The only thing that's going to make this better is if they turn to Sir Norman to explain exactly what we've just seen. I have no idea what that is.
tell us what type of weapon you think the Russians are using here?
I have to say that this is very disturbing. This is not a conventional torpedo by any means, and there is no doubt in my mind that Russia are using a nuclear-tipped torpedo, which generally has a yield of around 10 to 20 kilotons, and certainly would be capable of delivering the type of impact we've seen in this footage. And I have to say that this brings us into a completely different type of game. There is absolutely no way that NATO can compete against this type of weaponry by relying purely on its conventional forces. So the question is how they will choose to respond in light of these developments.
We understand that the Russian Northern Fleet, led by the Kirov-class battlecruiser Peter the Great, has taken up a strategic position in the Norwegian Sea, and we believe that they have very considerable military assets, such as fighter.
Gotta be honest, that's a pretty badass name for a battleship, Peter the Great. Look, if you're going to tell me that there's going to be a sea battle between the Peter the Great and the HMS Duncan, unfortunately, I'm going to have to put my money on Peter the Great.
Fighter jets, advanced amphibious and landing craft, Akula-class submarines, and of course hundreds of cruise missiles, including those capable of carrying nuclear warheads. We're now being joined by our colleagues at the BBC studios in Manchester, who'll be helping us as we bring you live news.
All right.
Let's hand over for the moment to my colleague Simon Kendall. Simon.
Thanks, John. We've been watching the situation with concern and will be providing any updates and information possible. We're also here in case Broadcasting House in London needs to be evacuated, which we believe is a possibility.
Okay.
Our military expert Sir Norman Fairchild will also stay on the line with us for the time being. But for the moment, let's get the latest news from Kate Miller. Kate?
Thanks, Simon. The NATO military base at Deveselu in Romania has been hit by cruise missiles fired from the Russian guided missile frigate Admiral Grigorovich, with over 40 confirmed fatalities and heavy damage.
Again, sorry, another badass name for a warship, the Admiral Grigorovich. They know all about mind games in Russia.
To buildings and runways. The government of neighbouring Moldova has declared a state of surrender and has pledged allegiance to the Russian state, providing a potentially important staging position and indicating Russian intent to push northwards and retake the western half of Ukraine. An estimated 20,000 Russian troops are reported to be massing on the border of Belarus, just north of the Ukrainian capital of Kiev, furthering concerns that a complete invasion of the former Soviet country is underway. The government of Ukraine has repeated their expression of concern and has requested direct military action by NATO against massing Russian forces. We've also had news that the Russian Air Force has attacked NATO missile defence systems in Romania and that Russian paratroopers have taken control of Odessa in Ukraine. The Russian government has warned against any NATO interference in its military activities in Ukraine and the Baltic region, stating that any hostile action by NATO forces would require a full retaliatory response against Western Europe and the United States. A statement from NATO Central Command is expected shortly, and we'll bring you that as soon as it comes in. So Norman, what's your assessment of the situation given this latest news?
Clearly this is a very worrying development, and there can be no doubt now that this is part of an orchestrated and premeditated strike by Russia against the West. NATO will have to...
Sir Norman's getting a little salty. Sir Norman's been fighting the Cold War since the end of World War II. He got very little tolerance for this kind of monkey business.
Respond, but we've clearly been caught napping. The West is totally unprepared for this type of scenario, so I think we're in serious trouble here.
The Russian government has repeated its assertion that its action is in response to years of increasing encroachment and political interference by NATO and its allies, warning that they'll respond massively should NATO create any further escalation in the conflict.
Thanks, Kate. We now have on the line Keith Fuller, an expert in civil defence and chief...
That's kind of a weird tone, wasn't it? When I got, thanks, Kate. And now we look at the weather. Seemed a little weird. Let's fast forward a little bit. Let's we don't need all right, here this sounds big.
...set them against blast and fallout. What's your assessment of the effectiveness of such measures?
I can tell you that I've worked in civil defence.
Nobody cares. This guy's
from radiation sick.
You've been critical of government policy on civil justice of the principle of protect and survive.
I would call it neglect and...
we don't need to listen.
Can you update us on the situation in Poland?
Okay.
We have...
All right, here you go. This is a dude. He's boots on the ground in Poland. The internet is still working. He's going to give some updates from Poland. Let's watch this guy.
An alarming situation here in Warsaw. People are very concerned and many are leaving the city. A short while ago we had a strange incident. The sky lit up a number of times. I could see it through our windows. The light just changed and it was very unusual. We have a few fixed cameras overlooking the city on the top of our studio building, and we can see that something did happen a few moments ago. Nobody knows what is really happening.
Andreas, we understand that the Polish government has declared a state of emergency, but have you witnessed any direct fighting or heard from anyone closer to the front line?
We are hearing sirens over Warsaw. We think that something is about to happen. We have been told to get shelter as quickly as possible. Maybe they
I'm sorry, but we seem to have lost our connection with Warsaw. We'll try and clarify.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't pieced it together, Warsaw, Poland is gone. Gone. Dude's in the middle of an interview. Warsaw is gone. Just dropped a bomb. And he's like, yeah, we saw the sky light up. So in the countryside, they knew they were using some kind of nuclear weapon. Warsaw is gone. We're all just going to move on. Here we go, folks. Buckle up.
Clarify the situation there and hopefully reconnect as soon as possible. But for the moment, let's go back to Kate Miller to see what the latest developments are.
No, we're going to see that again. We're going to watch that again.
Over Warsaw.
Closer to the front line.
We are hearing sirens over Warsaw. We think that something is about to happen. We have been told to get shelter as quickly as possible. Maybe they
I'm sorry, but we seem to have lost our connection with Warsaw. We'll try and clarify the situation there and hopefully reconnect as soon as possible. But for the moment, let's go back to Kate Miller to see what the latest developments are. Kate.
Thanks, John. The leader of the Labour Party...
Seriously, good move. After that, I need to hear from Kate. Kate's been a calming presence throughout this. She's no Sir Norman, but Kate has become a favorite of mine. And yeah, I got a Hugh in the chat room. That dude was way too calm. That dude was like, what are you doing? You're still live streaming? You know, I trust me as a live streamer. I would not still be live streaming if they're telling me to get, well, maybe I would. Actually, maybe I would. Maybe that's the way to go. Because if we're at that point, I ain't going to survive. I ain't going to. All right, let's keep going. Kate, come on. We're very scared, Kate. Calm us down.
But we seem to have lost our connection with Warsaw. We'll try and clarify the situation there and hopefully reconnect as soon as possible. But for the moment, let's go back to Kate Miller to see what the latest developments are. Kate.
Thanks, John. The leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, has complained that the government is not telling the public the whole truth about the conflict, arguing that people have the right to know what's happening and what danger they face. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has ordered emergency announcements to be brought...
Here's what I love about that. Jeremy Corbyn, who's a big rabble-rouser over there anyway. He's one of these political... He'd fit right in America, in the modern American political landscape of today. Jeremy Corbyn is using this to... the people should know! No, they shouldn't. No, we shouldn't. We don't need... One, we don't need to know. We don't need... If it's inevitable, we don't need to know. What's that going to do? It's going to just... People pouring out into the streets, burning houses. You know what I mean? Just, we don't need to know. It's best... Hey, look, you know, I'm a big fan of the mafia. Well, I mean, big fan of mafia lore. Just one to the back of the head. That's it. That's the way to go. Don't sit me in the chair in the basement with hogtied and torture me. No. Bring me in. You know, tell me that I'm being made. This is my ceremony. And as the card is burning in my cupped hand, put one in the back of the head. That's how I want to go. So no, Jeremy Corbyn, the people don't have a right to know. We're watching it. BBC is doing their job. We don't want to know. We can't handle it. Same reason we can't have flying cars. I keep going back to this. You people, I want flying cars. Can't have flying cars. We can't even adhere to the rules of the road when gravity is keeping us tethered. Imagine people start flying around in cars. They're going to crash into each other. Schools are going to burn. They're going to crash into hospitals. They're going to drop into living room. Come on. All right, here we go. But it is nice to see that even in our darkest moments, there will be some political opportunists who take that chance to, you know, divide us even more. We have a right to know. Here we go.
Immediately
hold on.
To provide shelter against a possible air and the right to know what's happening and what danger they face. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has ordered emergency announcements to be broadcast and has instructed that all underground stations be immediately open to members of the public to provide shelter against a possible air attack on the capital.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. We've just had breaking news of a significant explosion at RAF Fylingdales in Yorkshire, the home of Britain's ballistic missile early warning system, in what appears to be the first direct attack against UK forces on British soil. We've also had reports of similar attacks on Thule Air Force Base in Greenland and on Clear Air Force Station in Alaska from what appears to be submarine-launched ballistic missiles.
Okay, here we go, folks. All right, this is what we've been waiting to hear about. Looks like an American nuke plant, I don't know what they're doing, a nuke farm, an American nuke place in Alaska has just been hit with submarine-launched Russian missiles. Also, England has been struck. An English Air Force base has been hit with nukes, or maybe, I don't know, tactical missiles. It's getting hot in here. Here we go.
Norman, this is clearly a strategic move by Russian military commanders.
Yes, all of these military bases are part of a network of early warning radar systems designed to detect a nuclear launch against the West and to help to target incoming nuclear warheads. NATO has quite a substantial anti-ballistic...
All right, thank you. Once again, Sir Norman. Sir Norman gets me back on the road. I had it wrong. These were not nuke attacks. It seems that what Sir Norman is saying, that these bases that have been attacked are the bases that provide us with our early warning system. So this is missiles are coming next, one must assume.
Missile system, but it relies on accurate targeting. So without these advanced radar capabilities, we'll be more or less shooting blind. It's pretty clear that we're going to get into a real shooting match very soon.
Thank you, Sir Norman. Obviously, we'll be monitoring the situation carefully as the mobilisation of British forces continues to accelerate. We have live footage from RAF Northolt near London. These appear to be Typhoon fighter jets taking off in rapid sequence. We have unconfirmed reports that RAF fighters have been sent to intercept Russian long-range bomber and surveillance aircraft. We stress that this is not confirmed.
You see how those bad boys are taking off? They're getting to high altitude as quickly as possible. There's no leisurely. These planes are lifting off and then tilting up and going straight for the stars.
But we will bring you as much information as possible as we receive it.
For X-ray Lima 41 and 42 for potential renegade ops vector 05, 1326 and 1327. Scramble, 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 acknowledge.
All right, let's see if this guy does it. Just go straight up. Military style. Yeah.
This is quite a powerful image, the weather obviously deteriorating somewhat. Clearly heading straight to a high altitude as quickly as possible.
Offensive.
The men and women of the Royal Air Force on their way into what must be a very uncertain future.
Tango 7, USS moves to Death Code 1. Secure the perimeter. Front. Roger that. Over.
Good luck, boys!
And we have similar scenes from NATO military bases and command facilities across Europe. Clearly, the military situation is of grave concern, but we're limited in what we can report. And we've just had reports of a major detonation at Beale Air Force Base in California.
Yeah.
We've had amateur footage from a number of sources in Sacramento that clearly show a huge cloud from what appears to be a massive explosion in the distance. Beale Air Force Base is part of the US Ballistic Missile Early Warning System and is a very important strategic target. We're receiving several videos and photos from news agencies indicating that something very serious has happened in California. We're expecting a statement from the Federal Emergency Management Agency at any time now. And we've just had news that the US ambassador and senior consulate staff are being evacuated from central London. Clearly, something has gone terribly wrong. Heavily armed US...
This is the motorcade evacuating the ambassador to the Court of St. James, the top ambassador job in the United States, the foreign affairs realm. They're getting everybody out of there. What do they know about London? Why isn't London a safe place for they are getting out?
Secret Service personnel are escorting US diplomatic staff to waiting helicopters and military aircraft. We've just heard that the Pentagon and all major centers of government are being evacuated. I'm not sure if that's Green Park or St James's Park in London, or possibly Hyde Park. These scenes are just unbelievable. The sense of urgency is very clear. They're getting out as quickly as possible now.
Oh, man. The rats are fleeing. That's kind of what I guess we're going to take from this. All right, so something is seemingly imminent here in the UK. Sorry, I'm having a little issue with the. There we go.
This is certainly a very frightening scene. All US military bases in Europe have been ordered to get their remaining aircraft into the air in what appears to be a frightening escalation in the conflict.
And we've just had a statement in from NATO Central Command. Western forces have used battlefield nuclear weapons against Russian troops and have also confirmed the destruction of the Russian city of Kaliningrad, which was a major military centre and submarine base.
All right.
The Polish capital of Warsaw has been hit by a nuclear detonation, estimated to be in...
All right, we're going to go back on this one, but we're now freely admitting the Western forces, isn't that from the movie Civil War that's coming? NATO is freely admitting at this point that they are using battlefield nukes and that they have destroyed the Russian city of Kaliningrad. Okay. So we know at least, we're not being victimized here. We're dishing it out too. That's why everybody's getting the hell. Warsaw is gone. We know that Warsaw is gone. We've seen a gigantic footage with no explanation of a mushroom cloud over Beale Air Force Base. So that's where we at right now. Let's keep going. Ooh, it's ramping up to something, gang.
In the 1 megaton range, targeted at advanced NATO positions to the east of the city, with no casualty figures as yet from its population of 1.7 million citizens. American B-2 strategic bombers have attacked Russian military bases in Belarus, and B-52 long-range bombers continue to approach Russian sovereign airspace. A NATO spokesman has said that efforts to contain the conflict are ongoing and that the American and Russian presidents are in direct contact at this time. The US president has assured the American public that everything is being done to resolve the situation.
So that's New York. I'm thinking this is New York. That looks like the, here.
Peacefully, and that the US government remains confident that the conflict can be contained. There are rumours that major Russian cities are being evacuated and that a national civil defence programme is underway to move citizens to underground shelters and subway systems. In Britain, the Ministry of Defence has said that it continues to monitor the situation very closely and that all efforts are being made to ensure the safety and security of the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, is said to be gravely concerned about the escalating crisis, but has asked the public to remain calm and to be confident that everything's being done to resolve the situation peacefully. The Archbishop of Canterbury and other senior religious leaders have asked people to come together in prayer at this time of great peril and to have faith that goodness will prevail over the forces of destruction.
And we've just had more breaking news that thermonuclear bombs of undetermined strength have exploded at NATO regional military headquarters in Brussels and at a major US military and radar base in Wiesbaden in Germany, resulting in the reported destruction of the city of Mainz and the outskirts of Frankfurt.
This is an emergency broadcast from the BBC.
All right, so here we go. So the last thing, and I'll back it up a little so we can see the transition again. Really put this on. There we go. So the last thing that we heard was that Brussels NATO headquarters has been hit by a nuclear weapon. They have wiped out all of the leaders of NATO, or at least the spokespeople for NATO or whatever. And then we also heard about another nuclear attack in America. So now we're going to switch over to the British version of the emergency alert system. Remember, I said just wait. So this has got to tell me that they've taken over the BBC. Nobody needs to listen to this guy in the suit anymore. Tell them about this developing situation. It is no longer a developing situation. It is a situation. So okay, so let's watch this now. I'll back it up just a little bit and let's let this play out. If you watched the earlier video, then you remember how it plays out in America with the EAS. This is how it happens in England. Here we go.
Goodness will prevail over the forces of destruction.
And we've just had more breaking news that thermonuclear bombs of undetermined strength have exploded at NATO regional military headquarters in Brussels and at a major US military and radar base in Wiesbaden in Germany, resulting in the reported destruction of the city of Mainz and the outskirts of Frankfurt.
This is an emergency broadcast from the BBC. Confirmation of a nuclear attack against this country has been received. The threat level is extreme, meaning that a major attack is imminent. All airports and motorways have been closed for military use. Non-essential telephone lines have been disconnected. Civilians are advised to...
All right, so am I wrong on this? Remember, if you watched the other video with me earlier today and we went through how this is going to play out with the American Emergency Alert System, and one of my big complaints was they got to make it more personal. It's got to sound like a human being. You know, it was like Alexa in the American version. It was very impersonal, very cold. I see the Brits are doing it again. They've got the velvet glove. I don't know if this woman is real, but she sounds more real than the other one. This woman is a good choice.
Stay in
maybe
all airports.
Maybe it's just the accent. I don't know.
And motorways have been closed for military use. Non-essential telephone lines have been disconnected. Civilians are advised to stay indoors. Please stand by for further information. This is an emergency broadcast from the BBC. Confirmation of a nuclear attack against this country has been received. The following locations have been confirmed by radar tracking as primary targets.
All right.
London, Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Glasgow, Crewe, Portsmouth, Cardiff, Newcastle, Leeds, Oxford, Sheffield, Plymouth, Edinburgh, Hull, Aberdeen, Derby, Coventry, Folkestone, Swansea, Leicester, Ipswich, Dover, Sellafield, Perth, Faslane, Cambridge, and Newport. All major airports, power.
All right, let me just say. All right, we just went through that list. Those are all major population centers there in the United Kingdom. So I was happy to hear that one city was not mentioned, and of course it's not, because nobody F's with the Irish. They ain't blowing up Cork or Dublin. Did they say Belfast? I don't even know. It's the great thing about being Irish. We've never really taken a part in any war. We fight the Brits. That's the only people that we really hate. But like, if all the shit goes down, nothing's going to change in Ireland. They're just going to keep being what they are. Doesn't matter if Putin wins, the Chinese people win. They're all going to leave Ireland alone because they just want to be, that's what they want. They just want to be left alone. I like that. I'm happy to hear that at least, well, I don't know if we're going to get a second wave, but at least here, as far as the first wave of attacks against the United Kingdom, that they seem to be leaving Dublin alone.
Power stations and military bases across the country have also been identified as primary targets. Civilians are advised to seek immediate shelter in the most secure location in your home. Create an inner refuge if possible by stacking furniture, mattresses or any heavy objects to protect you from the effects of blast and fallout. Stay away from windows and external doors.
Get out! Stack cushions. Stack cushions. Yeah, you know, they drop a nuclear bomb in your town square. Just stack some cushions. Get behind the couch. Yeah, you'll be fine.
Turn off all gas appliances, and extinguish any open fires or flames. Gather as much drinking water and food as possible, and store them in your inner refuge. Please stand by for further information. This is an emergency broadcast from the BBC. Confirmation of a nuclear attack against this country has been received. After the main nuclear attack is over, it is unlikely that any rescue or firefighting resources will be available. Radioactive fallout and damage to infrastructure and transportation links will make it difficult for your local civil defense authority to reach you within the first week of an attack. Store your food and water carefully, and use fresh produce first, leaving canned or preserved foods for later. Do not leave your shelter to seek out medical assistance, food or drinking water, as radioactivity levels will be extremely dangerous for at least the first 7 to 10 days. If you have any fatalities as a result of the attack, you should wrap the body as tightly as possible in paper, polythene, sheets or blankets, and move the body to a nearby...
All right, that transition was a bit jarring, but she is giving instructions on how to handle your dead. That's what we get here. We got a stupid countdown like a goddamn game show with the American EAS. And then we got some jingoistic bullshit where they're going to play us the national anthem while we all get vaporized together. That's some bullshit. I like this. This is stuff I need to know. In this moment, I really, I was talking about all the basic things that the American EAS was telling us. Fallout is bad for you. Don't treat it like snow. Don't run around with your tongue hanging out, hoping to catch some fallout on you. That was the American thing. These people, the Brits, they are giving us real important information that we should not know, like what to do with the body of, grandma. Because if we got to stay in this place for a couple of days, we can't go out and we got bodies rotting. How do you take care of bodies? See, this is very important stuff. The Brits,
has been received. After the main nuclear attack is over, it is unlikely that any rescue or firefighting resources will be available. Radioactive fallout and damage to infrastructure and transportation links will make it difficult for your local civil defense authority to reach you within the first week of an attack. Store your...
You're on your own, is what they're saying, just flat out. Hey, people of Britain, whether it's the Romans attacking, whether it's all the times we've been invaded, you are on your own.
Food and water carefully, and use fresh produce first, leaving canned or preserved foods for later. Do not leave your shelter to seek out medical assistance, food or drinking water, as radioactivity levels will be extremely dangerous for at least the first 7 to 10 days. If you have any fatalities as a result of the attack, you should wrap the body as tightly as possible in paper, polythene, sheets or blankets, and move the body to a nearby...
Attack warning red. Attack warning red. Seek immediate shelter. Seek immediate shelter. Attack warning red. Attack warning red.
President Putin declared in the autumn of 2021, and he actually sent a draft treaty that he wanted NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. That was what he sent us. And that was a precondition for not invade Ukraine. Of course, we didn't sign that. The opposite happened. He wanted us to sign a promise never to enlarge NATO. He wanted us to remove our military infrastructure in all allies that have joined NATO since 1997, meaning half of NATO, all the Central and Eastern Europe. We should remove NATO from that part of our alliance, introducing some kind of E and B or second-class membership. We rejected that. So he went to war to prevent more NATO close to his borders. He has got the exact opposite. He has got more NATO presence in the eastern part of the alliance, and he has also seen that Finland has already joined the alliance, and Sweden will soon be a full member.
All right, there you have it. How you feeling? How about that, huh? That was crazy balls. Yeah, well, those are the things that I've been watching. There's a bunch of other ones too. Maybe in the future we'll do more of these. I appreciate you hanging out with me once again. Join us for the High Noon Rant every Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. It's all the day's hot topics, current events, anything that people are buzzing about. I give it to you every day, Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. It is talk radio without the political bullshit. We don't care how you voted or whatever. It's talk radio the way that's not allowed on actual radio, so we got to do it here. Hot talk, current events driven. What the heck is that noise? I was rolling, and now I'm interrupted by some noise coming from another source. Well, Al, I was like, thank you for bringing it. Al, you're too sweet. It was just fun. It was just, I'm putting off doing stuff. I got to finish up some packing here. And I was like, this is the last day that I'm going to be doing shows from this particular studio. Now, I know that we're going to continue doing other shows. I know that, that's not a concern in the least. So don't worry about that. We'll be back Monday. No show tomorrow. No high noon show tomorrow. But I don't know. It's like I want to keep doing. I want to keep, because as soon as I stop this, it's going to be like, well, that's all the streaming I'm ever going to do from the Comfort Nest Studios. And, that's kind of sad. All right. Thank you for joining us. This has been how the BBC is going to break it to us that the world is ending. Creepy ass stuff. Maybe I'll find another, because later tonight I'll be like, what else can I do? Appreciate you guys. See you tomorrow at noon. No. See you Monday at noon. There is no high noon show tomorrow. Forgot it. It's moving day. No high noon show tomorrow. But I'll see you on Monday. Okay. From a new location. Love you guys. I am Pugs Moran, and this is the High Noon Rant.